In this section, we focus on how to prepare a form known as a worksheet. So, what is a worksheet? A worksheet is just a form or a tool that companies may decide to use to capture the information to prepare their different types of financial statements. Now, the worksheet is not a financial statement. It is not part of our accounting records. It may be a computerized worksheet or prepared using a form or a program such as Microsoft Excel. We're going to focus on what we call the 5 sections or the 5 steps of the worksheet. The worksheet is not a required form to be used, it is optional, but the worksheet is considered to be very helpful by many business organizations. So here we have the actual sample worksheet. So first we will list all of the account titles. And when you list the account titles, as we're going to see, they must be listed in a certain order. We'll talk about that. There's a trial balance section, an adjustment section, an adjusted trial balance section, an income statement section, as well as a balance sheet section. Those are the 5 sections of the worksheet. They each have 2 columns, a debit and a credit column, which gives you a total of 10 columns. Therefore, we call this a 10-column worksheet. So first, we're going to list all of the account titles. When you list your account titles, you list them in order of your chart of accounts, or in the same order as your ledger accounts. You first list all of your asset accounts, followed by your liability accounts. I lost my mouse. There we go. Next, you list your stockholders' equity accounts, followed by your revenue accounts, and last, you list all of your expense accounts. When preparing the trial balance section of the worksheets, the amounts shown here are coming from the individual ledger accounts. The ledger shows if the account has a debit ending balance or a credit ending balance. Your job is to record the account balance in the appropriate debit or credit column of the trial balance section. If an account has a debit balance, record it in the debit column. If a credit balance, record it in the credit column. Once you list all the account balances, get a total for your debit column, get a total for your credit column. Those two amounts must equal one another. If they do not balance, you must figure out what is causing the error. Perhaps a number was transposed, or you put an amount on the incorrect side of the trial balance, or maybe you forgot to put an actual amount for a certain account title. But you have to figure out what is causing the trial balance to be out of balance before we can continue with the worksheet. Okay, so we balance, let's go on. Next, you're going to look at the adjusting entries that we have recorded already throughout the accounting period. These adjusting entries are recorded next in the adjustment section of the worksheet. So all of these adjustments you see here are coming from the adjusting entries that were made during the course of the accounting period. It's the same thing. I'll go back. So if supplies expense was debited in the journal as an adjustment, I'm going to debit supplies expense in the adjustment section of the worksheet. So again, this data is coming from the general journal. You're going to record the adjustments here in the worksheet adjustment section. Just like the trial balance, the adjustment section must also be in balance. The total of your debit column should equal the total of your credit column. And that shouldn't be too hard because if you're doing your journal, as long as each of your journal entry balances out and you record the amounts correctly, the adjusted trial balance section should be in balance as well. Next, you have the adjusted trial balance, which is just a combination of the first two categories. It shows each account balance after we have made the required adjustments at the end of the accounting period. So for those accounts that were not adjusted, meaning there's no amount shown in the adjustment section, take the amount from the trial balance, bring it over to the adjusted trial balance. If the account was adjusted, you must determine what would be the account balance after I've made the adjustment. For example, our supplies balance was $2,500 on the debit side. Then the account was credited for $1,500 as an adjustment. Therefore, my new balance for my supplies account would be a balance of $1,000 shown on the debit side. So the adjusted trial balance shows each account balance after we've made the required adjustments at the end of the accounting period. Next up, you have the income statement section of the worksheet. You want to ask yourself what types of accounts appear on the income statement, and you are correct. It's going to be your revenue accounts and all of your expense accounts are going to appear on the income statement section of the worksheet. So for your revenue account and your expenses, take the amounts from the adjusted trial balance, bring them over to the income statement section of the worksheet. Again, for your revenue account, service revenue, and all your expenses, bring the balances from the adjusted trial balance over to the income statement section of the worksheet. Notice that as of right now, for the income statement section, the debit column does not equal the credit column, but we're going to make these balance out during the last step of preparing the worksheet. The other accounts, your assets, your equity accounts, and your liability accounts, take those balances from the adjusted trial balance, bring it over to the balance sheet. In other words, if an account is not shown on the income statement section, then bring it over to the balance sheet section. Again, that'll be your asset accounts, your liability accounts, and your stockholders' equity accounts. Now, once again, notice that for the balance sheet debit and credit column, those amounts are not in balance. So we have one final step to complete the worksheet. You ready? All right. Next, we want to determine if we have net income or a net loss for the accounting period. So focus on the income statement section of the worksheet. The total of the debit column shows the total expenses that took place for the accounting period. The total on the credit column shows the total revenue that was earned for the accounting period. To determine whether we have net income or a net loss, subtract total expenses from our total revenue. So in that case, what we have, would we have net income or a net loss? You are correct, we would have net income. So the last step of the accounting cycle is to record your net income or your net loss into the appropriate column. What you're going to do, you're going to add the net income or the net loss to the smaller side of the income statement and to the smaller side of the balance sheet. So I'll say it again. You're going to add the net income amount or the net loss to the smaller side of the income statement and the smaller side of the balance sheet. So for my income statement, the debit column was smaller. I'm going to add the net income amount to the debit column. Now my debit credit column balance one another. When it comes to the balance sheet, Notice that my credit side was smaller. I'm going to add the net income to the credit side of my balance sheet. Now the debit and credit column of my balance sheet is in balance. Once all 5 sections are in balance, trial balance section balances, adjustments, adjusted trial balance, income statement, and the balance sheet, you have now completed all 5 sections of the worksheet. Now you're saying, what is the purpose of the worksheet being prepared? I'm glad you asked this question. I can now take this information and prepare my different types of financial statements. For example, on the income statement, we already know the amount of our net income or our net loss because it is shown here on the actual worksheet. One thing I've got to tell you is that depending upon whether you have net income or a net loss, you're going to write the word net income or a net loss here under your account title section so that we understand this number here if it represents a net income or a net loss. So this is how you complete all 5 sections of what's known as a worksheet. Okay? All right.